and thank you for coming today. I'm Dr. Jordan Soper. I'm a board-certified behavioral and cognitive psychologist, as well as an ASEX-certified sex therapist. Welcome back to Psych Reads, and have we got a goodie for you today? The Come As You Are book by Dr. Emily Nagoski, which talks about a variety of different topics specifically related to women's sexual health, and the way that she is defining woman in this book is if it is a vulva or vagina haver, hence the please enjoy the vulva replication on the top. We're going to be spending some time today in the book reviewing the idea of disgust. So really looking at how those cultural biases, how not having a sex positive viewpoint can really have a giant impact on a person's sexual functioning. So whether or not you have a vulva or vagina, or you interact with one, or you don't have one, and you just want to learn some knowledge, have we got some coming for you to do today. So let's take a look, shall we? When somebody yucks your yum, disgust can function as a social emotion. That is, we learn about what aspects of the world, including our own bodies, are disgusting by reading the responses of the people around us. For example, infants will avoid a toy that their adult caregiver looks at with an expression of disgust. Predictably, the experience of disgust is context sensitive. We're less grossed out by sex-related things while we are sexually aroused. And women tend to be more sensitive than men to learned disgust, particularly in the sexual domain, though it's not quite clear yet. Though it's not yet clear why. We can see how the process of learning disgust can unfold, moment by moment in a person's life, if we imagine, for argument's sake, a pair of identical twin girls separated at birth. Let's call them Jessica and Teresa. Imagine that both Jessica and Teresa, when they're maybe 5 or 6 years old, have a habit of masturbating in their rooms at nap time. If you noticed a disgust withdrawal response in yourself at the idea of a young girl masturbating, you've just experienced what I'm about to describe. So one day, Jessica is masturbating in her room at nap time when her adult caregiver walks in and sees her with her hand down her pants. The parent recoils in an involuntary disgust response and says, "Stop that!" On that same day, in a different home, Teresa is also masturbating, and her adult caregiver also walks in and sees her with her hand down her pants. But that parent says calmly, "We're leaving for your aunt's house in just a few minutes. Get your shoes on." Jessica's brain learns to associate the shame and distress breaks communicated by her parent with whatever sexual arousal accelerator she was feeling at the moment her parent scolded her. Teresa's brain, by contrast, learns no such association. She was interrupted but not shut down, her accelerator deactivated but without necessarily hitting the brake. This one incident may not have a lasting impact. If there are no other incidents to reinforce this one, the association in Jessica's brain will be decoupled. Now, 20 years have passed, and Jessica and Teresa's life experiences have routinely reinforced these patterns. Jessica's brain has learned to associate sexual arousal with stress, shame, disgust, and guilt. Teresa's has learned to associate sexual arousal with pleasure, confidence, joy, and satisfaction. Which of them has a better sex life? Jessica will feel conflicted about her sexual sensations. They're pleasurable, and they're not at the same time. And she won't have a clear idea why she feels guilty, ashamed, depressed, or even physical pain when she's sexually aroused. If a girl has a particularly sensitive brake system, one incident might be enough to create a tangled knot in her arousal process. For many women, though, it takes consistent reinforcement of a negative message in order for it to be embedded in sexual response, and consistent reinforcement takes a sex-negative culture. In other words, it happens all the time. Often disgust is reinforced in subtle ways, but sometimes we can remember a specific moment when the message is made clear. I talked to a grandmother, a badass Southern Belle sex-educating grandmother, to be specific, who told me about just such a moment from when she was a teenager. She had been sitting on the front porch making out with her boyfriend, but when she went inside, her mother came up to her with a disgust in every line of her face and said, "What you were just doing out there, that's sex." And this 60-something grandmother told me. It took me a long time to realize why I got so anxious about sex with my husband. And I mean nauseated anxious. And when I finally figured it out, I was angry for about 10 seconds, and then I was just so sad for my mother. She went on. Now, when I do health education at my church, I just say it right out loud. I like sex. I want everyone to know that it's okay. I love this woman. For sex educators, the rule is don't yuck anybody's yum. And since we can't know what everyone else's yums are, we don't yuck anything. We know that disgust is a social emotion and that our students have already been exposed to too many people who communicate disgust around sex. That's why sex educators and sex therapists, hey, that's me, go through an educational process of intensive exposure, love it, deliberately designed to minimize our own judgment, shame, and disgust reactions so that we can respond with open neutrality to whatever students or clients bring into the room. This training often takes the form of a sexual attitude reassessment, a multi-day training that includes values clarification exercises, guest panels, and speakers, plus a range of porn that would surprise most people in its variety, intensity, and creativity, followed by reflection and processing of our own reactions to all of it. Unless you become a sex educator, you never need to go through a process like this. All you ever need to do is begin to recognize where your learned disgust response is interfering with your own sexual pleasure, and decide whether it's something you'd rather let go of. Your genitals and your partners, your genital fluids and your partners, your skin and sweat, and the fragrances of your body. These are all healthy and beautiful, not to mention normal, elements of a human sexual experience. You get to choose whether you feel grossed out by them. The research tells us that disgust, as a learned response to sex, impairs women's sexual functioning and is especially associated with sexual pain disorders. In the next section, I'll describe 3 strategies for making your own choices about what is or isn't disgusting. They're the same strategies you use to make your own choices about self-criticism. But the first step is to begin to notice when you experience an involuntary withdrawal from sex-related things, and try on the possibility that the sights, the smells, the sounds, the stickiness of your own sexual organisms are glorious and beautiful parts of being a human. Because what if all of that actually is beautiful and glorious? What if your body is cause for celebration? P.S. It totally is. Let's get practical. Sex-negative culture has trained us to be self-critical and judgmental about our bodies and our sexualities, and it's interfering with our sexual well-being. So how do we create a bubble of sex positivity for ourselves, where we can explore and celebrate and maximize our own sexual potential? How do we maximize the yum in a world that tries to convince us we're yucky? I've found persuasive evidence that the following 3 strategies can genuinely create positive change. And if you would like to know those strategies, might I recommend getting a hold of Come As You Are and reading it. This book is fantastic. Honestly, most of the things that Dr. Nagoski does are fantastic. She's a wonderful educator and speaks so well and to a variety of different persons about these very, very vital topics. This book is actually required reading of all of my students, very many of my patients, and honestly, that is the reason its poor spine is falling apart, is because I reread it quite often. I really wanted to highlight this chapter in particular because it highlights so much about the interconnection between thoughts and feelings. Disgust is often a physiological sensation as well as an emotional sensation. It's an emotional response and a physiological response that is connected to our perception, our cognition. Think of it a little bit like your filter system up here about stimuli. The reason this really comes up in the work that I do is I work a lot with individuals who have OCD, who have PTSD, who have different phobias or almost different like sensory reactions, where they might experience a higher propensity for disgust related to different stimuli. And I see this come up so freaking much in the type of therapy that we're doing because it comes up so much in their sex life, with themselves and with others. So this is why you'll probably get so tired of sex educators and sex therapists saying the phrase of don't yuck other people's yums. This is why. Messages about sexual functioning, sexuality, humanity create high degrees of shame. Shame is the biggest boner killer that exists. It's the biggest mental cock block that exists because it really reduces a human to a less than position, or that there's something wrong with them. But coming from a more open-ended space can be so freaking powerful, and we want that to happen more and more and more. That is why I love cognitive behavioral therapy so much, because that is something that I do so regularly with patients, is how do we disconnect that paired association between sex and shame. We want to go so we can, do other things here. So what are some of your questions or reactions that you had as we were reviewing this particular chapter in Come As You Are? Have you ever read this book before? Are you definitely interested in reading it now? Feel free to put your questions or comments down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you next Wednesday for another episode of Psych Reads. See you then.